Education plays an important role of nurturing moral characteristics and knowledge and cultivating people's wisdom generation after generation. When people's moral standards and knowledge are lowered, it will take just a few generations for the country to lose its progress and its competitiveness. The United States is the world's #1 country in many aspects, including economics, military, and technology. Therefore, the communists have made tremendous efforts to corrupt the United States, drag it down economically, and make it fall behind militarily and technologically, and ruin its education. We will concentrate in this video on the topic of how communists successfully infiltrated the U.S. education. We will focus on dumbing down students first, and deliberate on ruining students' morality in the next video. As we mentioned in a previous video, corrupting mass media, a communist goal to defeat the U.S. Communism has many variations and mutations. It uses slaughter and violence to destroy those who refuse to follow it in the East. However, in the West, it takes recourse in the language of science and progress and the slogans of democracy, equality, political correctness, and social justice to infiltrate education, media, art, and law systems, bringing people under its banner without their awareness. Before we go into detail, let's first look at the goals communists have set up to ruin the U.S. education system and younger generations, which were listed in The Naked Communist. Number 17. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. Number 19. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. In the last several decades, the U.S. has been experiencing an accelerated decline in educational standards and is at the bottom of the list, ranking with other developed countries, especially in primary and secondary education performances. Several surveys conducted internationally by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in 2018, designed to measure how successful young students are in math, reading, and science, clearly showed that the U.S. ranked 25th worldwide, well below other developed countries. In reacting to these scores, then Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos said in a statement, "We are being outpaced not only by our global competitors like China and Russia, but also by countries like Estonia, Finland, and Canada." In goal number 17 set up by communists shown above, softened curriculum has been a very effective way to make American students perform poorly. In the name of social justice, being fair to low-income students, disadvantaged groups, and political correctness, under the name of progressiveness education ideology, there have been so many distracting courses and much content added to schools' curriculum, such as safe sex education or drug and death prevention. But this inevitably squeezed out and watered down traditional courses and content. John Taylor Gatto, a senior teacher and educational researcher in New York City, wrote in 1983, "Pick up a 5th grade math or rhetoric textbook from 1850, and you'll see that the texts were pitched then on what would today be considered college level." The 1960s anti-culture movement not only corrupted U.S. culture, which was shown in our previous video, Anti-Culture Movement in the 1960s, but also accelerated the decline of the U.S. education systems. Students were distracted by so many things: drugs, sex, liberation, self-indulgency, hip-hop, and rock and roll, that made it difficult for them to concentrate on traditional education and studies. From 1963 to 1980, U.S. students' SAT scores declined dramatically, with the average verbal score dropping by more than 50 points and the average math score dropping by nearly 40 points. The U.S. Department of Education summarized these alarming facts in their 1983 April issue, A Nation at Risk, which stated, "Many 17-year-olds do not possess the higher-order intellectual skills we would expect from them. Nearly 40% cannot draw inferences from written material. Only 1/5 can write a persuasive essay, and only 1/3 can solve a mathematics problem requiring several steps. Even worse, in order to avoid making the American education system look bad, in 1994, the College Board redefined the scores of the SAT. When the modern form of the SAT began to be adopted in 1941, the average score of the language exam was 500 points. Top marks are above 800 points. By the 1990s, the average score had dropped to 424 points. The College Board redefined 424 as 500 points. Charles Krauthammer, a Pulitzer Prize winner from the Washington Post, published an article in the Chicago Tribune in 1994. In it, he asked why the average SAT scores have slid 76 points in verbal and 22 points in math since 1941. His answer comes from the College Board, who said, most infrequent users of the SAT expect the average to be about 500. He further commented, they think a 424 verbal is below average, whereas in fact, it is today's sorry mean. We will now cure them of this debilitating misapprehension by recentering. By decree, every 424 turns into a cool 500. In the last several decades, many people, including the US presidents, wanted to do something to revert the trend of decline, namely back to basics, national standards, and no child left behind. Unfortunately, all of these efforts did not change the facts that the US education systems were severely damaged and students' performance have not been improved. The reason for the decline of US schools' performance is not that students today are not as intelligent as before, but because communists are quietly carrying out a war against our next generation, using the education system as its weapon.
For changing our education system.
Charlotte Thompson Iserbit, a former senior policy advisor to the U.S. Department of Education, wrote in 1999, the reason Americans do not understand this war is because it has been fought in secret, in the schools of our nation, targeting our children who are captive in classrooms. The wagers of the war are using very sophisticated and effective tools. We will concentrate on how communists successfully ruined our students' morality in our next video.